morning, everybody. It is so good to have you here with me. Imagine
if you have your vision as the car with the right team.
Imagine how quick that vision will come into the picture. Something that was taking 5 years takes 3 months. This morning is all about the leadership and influence. Good morning, everybody. Greetings again. It's so good being with you again on the Inside Show with Carl Hendricks. Well, we are busy with book series at this point in time, and man, I tell you, the people that came through this series, you can't believe who did this show with me every single time. Somebody that just blow your mind. I tell you, there's people in the studio here with me this morning again, or somebody in the studio with me this morning again. But before we get there, I would love you, please, if you don't mind, just to sign onto the Inside Show and hit that bell every time. Please subscribe and hit that bell every single time when we're online. You will know that we are online. This morning, not different. We have a wonderful person here. I tell you, this person with credentials and experience in life, you can't believe. I feel jealous about the mere fact that she went through such a lot of stuff in her own life. A book entitled Finish What You Started is coming soon. We have the manuscript, the privilege of having the manuscript with us here in the studio. We went through the manuscript. I tell you, what a wonderful story. You really want to listen to the story. Most of us start out with something in life, but we never finish. And I tell you, this story will move you. Kelly is with us here. Kelly Nxumalo, she's with us today in the studio with the book Finish What You've Started. And a warm welcome to you. And it's so good to have you with us here this morning.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carl.
Yeah, it's so good. Great to have you. Congratulations again on your new book. This book will be available in the next 2 weeks. So how do you feel about finishing and starting this book?
Oh, it's been an awesome journey. It's been a trial and error journey. I started during COVID, left it aside, and when I got COVID and I was confined to be in my room for the 2 weeks, that was my go-to place. Even struggling through the breathing exercises and having my oxygen levels go down to a point where I was like, okay, Lord, I'm ready to go now.
Oh, my word. You also struggled with COVID?
Yes, I did. So it was through that time period, twice in fact. So I don't know if it was God's part of saying to me, you haven't finished what you started, so I'm going to put you back there so that you can finish. So on the second time around was the most difficult time, because that's the time when I had to drive myself to the hospital just in time to be placed on oxygen.
Wow. What a journey. Please introduce yourself to the viewers. Tell us where you're from and what you're doing and what you're busy with currently.
So I was born in Kliptown. Everybody would know Kliptown. That's from Johannesburg. So I was born in Kliptown, raised by my granny and my mom. My mom was very young when she had me, so the responsibility of raising me fell to Gran, even though mom was very present. So when Kliptown was demolished, or the part of Kliptown that we were demolished, we then moved to Extension 3, and that's where most of my upbringing was until Gran decided the flats is not good. It's not a good place to be. It's very gang-ridden, and so we moved to Extension 7, and that's where I grew up. The most part of my life was in a gang-infested environment, but it was also in that environment that I learned that you have to have tenacity, you have to persevere. And finishing off my matric, being one of the first grandchildren in my family, and also from my grandchildren, I was the oldest grandchild, and so grandchildren never finished matric. So it was the first in my family to finish matric, the first to go on to study, and the first to travel the world. So it's always been one thing that Omi instilled in me was to finish what I started.
That constant pressure of doing things all the first.
Yes.
And then you change careers from one to the other. Just give us a short journey about how you changed your career starting out after high school.
So I wanted to I really got onto the bus because my granny was extremely strict. When 6 o'clock came, you had to be in the house. When the street lights came on, you had to make sure that you're inside. But now when I look back, I almost understood why she was that strict, and it really helped me that didn't matter where I was. And so the verse that says, bring up a child in the way that he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it, is really a verse that I came to appreciate once I got to Cape Town. So when I got to Cape Town, I really didn't apply. I didn't know what I was going to study. I just said, I'm here, so
That's
yeah,
weird.
I am.
It's almost like get onto the bus.
Yes.
Just get on the bus. That's it.
So I studied human resources down in Cape Town because I love people. I love to see people. I love to develop the talent that people have. And I don't think people realize how talented they are. I don't think they realize the gifting and the talents that God has placed in them. So for me, it has always been my passion to draw that out of people, to help them to look into the mirror and to see what really is deep down inside. And so therefore, human resources was my thing I got into. But due to a whole lot of things like my friend dying, alcohol, moving away from grants, teachings and stuff, I did not finish my degree that I started out. I moved back to Johannesburg. My sister was abducted. I don't mention that in the book because that's in another book that is also coming
There's a lot
next
of
year.
books in you, eh?
And then I moved to banking. First a missionary because I honestly believe that that's the call God has on my life, was to seriously take God's word, but in a manner that young people can identify with. Because I think for young people, or for me at the time, and I think still for young people, is church for me, is religion for me. And for me, I don't believe in religion. I believe religion kills, and it's the sword that kills a whole lot of churches, but it's that relationship with God. It's that passion that you have for God. And I didn't quite understand it until I was on the mission field where I saw young people struggling, and I began to understand, wow, I'm not alone. I didn't have the struggles just because I needed to go through them. I understood that that was my journey to help other people. So I became a missionary. I traveled the world, saw the 7 seas, moved back. And when I was on the plane, I'm like, okay, Lord, where to now? So the Lord was like, Priska. I'm like, no way. That it can't be.
You know what? If God sent me to Priska, I never been there. But one year I was traveling between here and in Cape Town. And do you know the heat sometimes on the road? It's so severe that it looks like waves.
Yes.
Eh?
Yes.
I said to God, even if you send an angel, and if you look to the right hand side, the grapes looks already like it's so dry. It's almost like it's ready for dry food. I said to God, even if you send an angel, I'm not coming here. And for you to take that call from Johannesburg to Cape Town to Priska, I tell you.
Yeah, so can you imagine being in a plane from New York City, having stayed in New York City for like 3-4 years of your life, and now going back to Priska, like, oh my goodness.
Exactly.
What a change.
So what happened in Priska?
So I started an NGO. I started an NGO in Priska, which was called Siaka, meaning Let Us Build. And it was birthed out of being in New York and having traveled all across the United States. And then also meeting young guys who taught me a lot about men. Because my relationship with men was very warped. My experience with men in my own family, with my non-present dad, my dad was not in my life. He just refused to be a part of my life, and that was his loss. So these young men really taught me what it is to have principles, what it is to have value, how to value women, and how they treated women. So when they came over to South Africa, once we have been there, they decided to do a tour in South Africa. And we all went down to Priska and ministered in the Northern Cape. That is really where the vision was birthed. And being down in Priska, having started a home and seeing these young kids flocking to the home, having something that they can value and have hope, that is where Siaka was built. And
I just want to fast forward a little. So now you're in Priska.
Yeah.
You're in the missionary field.
Yeah.
And then from Priska, you end up in the banking.
Yes.
And then from the banking, at the age of, according to your manuscript, at the age of 44,
Yes.
you weirdly decided you want to be a lawyer.
Change gears.
You changed gears again.
Yeah.
Do you surprise yourself more than once, or was this all the time? is this exactly what you wanted to do? Because you mentioned in your book that even your husband was surprised and people couldn't believe that you wanted to go law. And your friends wanted to persuade you in a different direction again.
Yes.
So you enroll at UNISA.
Yeah.
Tell us the story.
All right. So I came back from Priska. I had my daughter, and I'm like, let me go do something different. I found myself that morning sitting in the taxi, and on my way, I'm traveling to UNISA. Got to UNISA, and I'm like, okay, so what am I going to do?
Again.
You
go to UNISA not knowing what field you really wanted to go into.
No, I just know. I just knew that I wanted to study. It was not enough for me to just have. Yes, eventually I did finish my my human resources degree, and then I went to study training. Standing at UNISA that morning, I'm like, I think I want to study law. And that's really standing in that long line, getting to the
You
front.
made your mind up in that queue
line.
Yes. My word. Yes. My word. So you enroll.
Yes.
And you qualify then as the lawyer. When did you do all your articles and whatever goes with that?
So 2017, I graduated from UNISA with my LLB degree. And I knew that I wanted to be a litigator. I wanted to be in court. So I decided not to take the attorney route. I decided to take the advocate route. And then doing pupillage was the most grueling, most difficult, most stressful, most hurtful, most crying period in my whole entire life. I wish it on nobody. Anybody who wants to do pupillage, please, you must know God. You have to know God.
Tell us why.
It is the year you are not allowed to work, first of all. So you don't have a salary. Imagine having worked all these years, me being at 44, a wife and a mother, now not having a second income in the house. My husband is in law as well. So it's a matter of now saying, what do we do on just one salary? So there were days when I literally cried on the way to class. Class starts at 7 in the morning. Then from there it ends at 8. I have to run back to court. Class was in Sandton. I have to run back to court, which was in Johannesburg, because it was where my mentor was, to be in court. Be in court almost the whole day and run back to Sandton at 4 o'clock in the afternoon to be in time for class, which starts at 4:30. Staying because assignment is due the next morning, staying up until 9 o'clock at night, finishing off the assignment, driving back home, then having to study further because the next morning you have to be engaging, you have to be present, you have to be in the class answering all their questions, and not having sufficient income. That was the most difficult time. That is the time where I really, really had to trust God. There were days, Dr. Carl, where I was driving and the tears streaming down my eyes and saying, Lord, you say you are Jehovah Jireh, but die petrol tank is leeg. Hoe kom ek daar so wat ek moet kom?
That sounds so familiar. You called me.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, you know, God was amazing in that he carried me through that. There was a time where I had to leave my car in Sandton and struggle to get from Sandton to Joburg. Have you ever walked in the rain, in the cold, from Southgate to Mondio? In the evening where it's like 9 o'clock at night and all you're praying is, Lord, put your angels around me because ek het nou die kar gelos in Sandton. There's no petrol. I have to walk home.
Oh, my
I
word.
don't even know if there's bread at home.
Oh, my word.
So, you know, God just sent angels. My cousin was amazing in coming one day and saying, just come to my house. And I said, how am I going to get there? I don't even have petrol to drive to the shop. And she said, please come to my house. And I got to her house and she said, there's the pantry. Take what you need. And that for me was just God opening up a door so that my family could eat.
Ladies and gentlemen, everyone watching out there, we've got an advocate Kelly in the house here from the dusty streets of Kliptown. Moved from one area to the other, lived in a flat infested with gang violence, and then Eldorado Park, a place where people look down on, and here God lifted this woman up. She knows how to fight and struggle through life. I think it's worth reading this book, finishing what you started, because there were a whole lot of odds, a lot of things against you. But you were so strong, fighting this good fight, and the tenacity that you had. I tell you, there's people out there, they really, really want to learn from you. And I think if they can get their hands on this book, this manuscript was so nice. Did you change anything in the manuscript in the meantime? No. Is it exactly the way it is?
Exactly as it is.
So we had the privilege to read this manuscript. But what would you introduce your book to the viewers? What is the main message of this manuscript, of the book?
The main essence of this book is giving up is not an option. It doesn't matter what it is you go through. Doesn't matter what obstacles is placed in your way. You are going to surprise yourself, one. You are going to encourage yourself, two.
I like that.
If you are going to push through, because a woman who's giving birth will tell you it's the most amazing thing, pushing through the pain.
Man, I tell you, I like the line when you say you it's about time that you surprise yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. There's about 10 things that you mentioned, and I don't want to give too much away. You said 10 things to remember when you start something. You say do not start what you do not intend to finish. How do you get that right? Because I think everybody at some point wanted to finish something.
Yeah.
So why will you use the word intend or intention right from the beginning?
You know, I'm going to put it very simple. When you get up in the morning and you decide that you're going to washing doesn't end by putting it in a washing machine.
Yes.
It ends by you taking it out of the washing machine, hanging it up on the line, getting it dry, taking it, folding it and ironing it, putting it back in the cupboard. That's when washing is finished. So when you decide that morning to do washing and you don't intend to finish it, don't even try starting it.
Talk to us about the mind that doesn't have the intention to keep two thoughts or to hold two thoughts, as you mentioned in your book.
It makes you miserable. It makes you miserable. You feel uncomfortable. Your mind does not have the ability to hold two opposing thoughts at the same time. The psychologists call it cognitive dissonance. So one thought will always fight for the other. And because you've started this one thing and you put something else in your mind, it has that conflict that it creates. So the next time you want to start again what you have finished, or what you have not finished, you almost have to go back to the very beginning, because now your mind is holding something which you have placed in there and you now come with something else. So that causes that conflict in your mind. So yes, we say as women, we multitask, we're good at multitasking. Something is going to lack. You're either going to elevate the one thing and neglect the other thing, or the other way around.
And that thought is as old as the mountains.
Yes.
If you consider Jesus Christ with John at Patmos on the island, he actually didn't want us to be lukewarm. It's either hot or cold.
Yes.
What he's actually saying, you can't hold two minds. You have to make your mind up. Isn't it familiar?
Yes, that is so awesome.
The second point you mentioned here, he said, when you have an idea, write it down. Share a little around it.
Yes. So I am a developer and designer in the L&D space. And you often find that the most creative ideas comes to you when you are sleeping. Somehow God just, waits for you to quiet down. And I think for many of us, we don't tap into that quietness. The Bible says in quietness and strength in quietness and peace is where your strength lies. And when you have that idea, stand up, man, get up and write it down. You may go back to it 2 years. I encourage every single body, even my daughters, I say to them, here is a journal. Every birthday they've ever had, they've received a journal. Write it down. You might go back to it 2-3 years down the line and say, oh yes, this was my idea, let me build on it.
And it's true, specifically, we as preachers, sometimes a thought drop in your heart. If you don't make a note of it, it's so gone, you can't even remember. But if that little note, even if it was one word, it will come back in its fullness.
Yes.
But if you cannot even get to that one word, and there's so many people out there with a lot of ideas and plans, and they don't put it to paper, and that's when it's just gone, forever gone.
I think I heard a message from you once, Dr. Carl, was the richest place on earth is the graveyard.
Yes.
Because when you go through the graveyard and you read those gravestones, you'll be amazed.
Wow. That is so true. That is so true. I don't want to be part of that, I promise you.
No, me neither.
Yeah. Of course you will never. At 44. What will you come up with? So now you're an advocate and you're still studying, right?
Yes, I am.
So what are you doing now?
I registered for my LLM, which is the Master's in Law. I finish that next year, and then we'll probably finish off my doctorate.
praise God for that. Is there petrol in the tank now?
More than enough.
But isn't it interesting? Those days shaped you.
Yes.
It makes you who you are today.
Yes.
So you can represent somebody. I don't know where you're going to end up one day. Maybe it's a magistrate or whatever, the direction God leads you, or what your niche or your interest will be. But can you imagine you handling cases, and here's the kids from Priska. You see them. You can just look in their eyes and you know they need an opportunity.
Yeah.
And here's somebody that's struggling, and I know what it is to walk in the rain. Isn't it interesting?
Yes.
The journey that God sometimes take us on.
Yeah. One of the things that I've learned, Dr. Carl, through my journey has been how God shapes your faith. Being a Christian doesn't happen overnight. And it's definitely not a
journey.
It's a journey. And, the rock that you are now is not the rock that you were 5, 6, 7 years ago. God needs to shape, chisel, mold, and get that rock to fit in the right place at the right time in the right season.
Preach it, preacher. On your third point, you said start small.
Yeah.
And you mentioned about your first salary that was 20 Rand a day, selling sweets in the dusty streets of Kliptown. So people don't think that they should necessarily start small.
Yeah. I see it with young people. When I worked in the bank in the HR space, we had such a big turnover with especially the younger generation, and they have got no staying power whatsoever. I mean, call any corporate, they will tell you that their turnover, especially when it comes to the youngsters, your 19, 20-year-olds, no staying power. Anything that is too much for them, they get out. And they want to come in earning a salary because they've got this degree. They want to earn the 30, 40,000s. But when you start small, you begin appreciating even the lukewarm water in the bath. Because you're not always going to have warm water. You're not always going to have cheese and bread. There are going to be days when you don't even have the bread. And then if you've placed your mind on this big dream that is now becoming such a big elephant, it becomes a nightmare instead of being a passion and a vision that you work towards. So therefore, my encouragement is to start small. Babies don't come out of the womb walking, talking. They go through certain phases and certain milestones in their life. And so also as adults, we need to apply that we can't just jump to step 10 when we don't even know how to climb step 1, 2, and 3.
So that tenacity is so important.
Yes.
That's the reason you emphasize it over and over. Finish what you started.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean you start on top.
No.
You have to start somewhere.
Yes.
Then you also mentioned timing is everything. Talk to me about that, because I know one or two things about timing, and sometimes my timing were out, and you don't just get it every time right.
No.
So just share a little about the timing aspect.
So for me, the timing to go to Cape Town and study human resources. If I look back in retrospect of my life, I don't use exactly what I've learned. So for me, that timing was not right for me to move on to Cape Town. I feel that had I just stayed and redone my matric, I probably would have had a better perspective and a better experience in Cape Town. There are many issues that I can think of when timing was just not right to go. I think especially of a certain time in the bank where I decided that I didn't want to be part of the bank that I worked for at the time. I wanted to move to another bank. And I didn't stay there long. I think I must have stayed there a month or so. And, getting back into the design space was where God wanted me in the first place. And because I decided to deviate from the plan in the wrong season, I brought on a whole lot of battles which shouldn't have been there in the first place. I mean, I remember standing at the robot where I didn't have any money, and the Lord was like, I need you to buy 10 loaves of bread. You pass 10 beggars. I said, with what money? I don't even have money to buy bread at home. And when I went through my purse, I found enough money for the 10 loaves of bread. And I gave the 10 loaves of bread to every passerby. And the next day, I got a phone call to say, can you come and start tomorrow back at the bank that you were? And once I was there, I realized that is where I should have been. That was the right timing, not when I was there before the time.
But Advocate Kelly, there is something about timing.
Yes.
That's not always clear.
Yeah.
with God.
Yes.
Sometimes with Joshua.
Yeah.
Remember now, if you
Yes.
go back to
Yes.
the Bible text, with Moses, here's a rod, touch it. Joshua there noticing his mentor, just touch the water and it
Yes.
opens up. It's like, wow. And here was now Joshua's turn with Jordan. He walked in ankle deep and then knee deep and then waistline before the Jordan opened up. So it's like, oh my God, you don't just get it right every
No.
time, right?
No.
And sometimes, even though your timing is a bit off, as long as you realize that was not God's
Yes.
timing, but this is,
Yes.
is to identify it.
Yes.
And that's the important factor about timing.
Exactly.
Very true. You talk about you are never too old to learn. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't want to fight with you around that one. You say in the EDTP world, we believe in lifelong learning. So people watching today, you decided to change career at 44. And today you're advocate and you're still studying, doing your master's now. There's people out there that think they're too old, like they married already. What message do you have to somebody like that?
True. In the education, training, and development world, we do believe in lifelong learning. We believe that life teaches you certain lessons, but it also opens you up to receive certain lessons. So my encouragement to, even if you're 70, you want to go back to varsity, maybe you've never completed that matric, please do it. Please do it. You are always going to feel that something is amiss in your life. And because you feel that something is amiss in your life, you begin to make decisions because of that missing link. I don't know if you've ever built a puzzle and as hy een stuk wat weg is, and your mind creates all kinds of havoc, like waar is hy stukkie? And you're not going to feel comfortable unless you find that piece and complete the puzzle.
Exactly.
So that is my encouragement to you, that you are not too old. I am 52 years old. And if I can learn, continue learning, you can too, because, God gives to each one what he wants to give. We're not, I think favorites. We are all his children.
Forgive quickly. You say one of those success things if you want to fulfill something. Forgive quickly. You say it's freedom.
Yeah.
You went through that journey.
Yes. I really didn't like men because of my dad. I didn't like men because of my dad, because of my uncles. My uncles, I don't know if because I was the youngest at home, in their mother's home, they were my mom's brothers, not my brothers, and so I was the youngest, staying with Gran, and so they used me as a punching ball. Dad wasn't there to fight my battles for me. And I really did not like guys. I didn't like men. I just wanted to stay away from them. My dad was my biggest obstacle. But I carried the load. I really carried it until I met God, until I met the person Jesus Christ. Not just having, being a Christian, but having a relationship and walking through that. And it was only when Jesus really, really touched me and sat me down one night and said, you can move on, you can go through so much things. There's so much things that you can accomplish in your life. This one thing I have against you. When the Bible speaks in Revelation and says, alles het jy gedoen, but you've lost your first love. One thing. And mine was unforgiveness. I had so much baggage. I lugged it along and it was so heavy that I could not move on to the next thing because of unforgiveness. And it was when I decided to forgive, that's when the freedom, the privilege of just waking up in the morning and not feeling the load, that was awesome. So I would encourage you that if somebody has wronged you, forgive quickly so that you can move on.
It's also back to that mind frame, that two thoughts at the same time. The bitterness towards unforgiveness, the fight. That constant fight. Stop trying to keep up with the Shabalalas and with the Joneses, you said. So you fight your own fights.
Yeah.
You raise your own race.
Yes.
And you're not in competition with nobody.
No.
How important is it not to be in competition?
You're always going to live your life for the next person. If you're going to be in competition with somebody else, nothing is going to be satisfying. This neighbor will have a bigger house. That neighbor will have a bigger car. So you're forever going to be the person that tries to keep up. You're never going to keep up. There's always going to be somebody more beautiful, somebody more thin, somebody is going to always have something that you don't have. I honestly believe that Psalm 139 is my favorite verse. And it says to me that I am intricately made and woven together. And when God wove me together, he probably didn't use the same weave that he used with you. Because we are so different, and God loves us in our differences. So can you imagine you being in competition? As baie werk man, Dr. Carl.
That is a lot of work to try to live somebody else, isn't it? You also mentioned about perfect what you are good at. So is that finding your niche?
Yes. Yes. Perfect the thing that you are good at. You're going to have so much joy if you perfect the thing that you're good at. If you are a good preacher, you know that God has called you, Dr. Carl, to this specific place. Perfect it. Perfect it so that when we one day stand before God, we can be like the guys who stood there with the 5 and the 2 and the 1 talent to say, this is what I've done with what you've given me. I was the one person that took my 1 talent and buried it and said, yeah, I can only do it. And I had to dig deep. Especially in writing this book, I had to dig really, really deep. And you think that you have forgiven, you think that you've moved on, you think that God has done an awesome thing in your life until you get to be naked with yourself. Naked, physically naked, spiritually, and stand in front of that mirror and say to yourself, is die al? Is this all? And I don't think for 1 second we've reached the pinnacle of what God has called me to do. So the little thing that I can do is to find that talent that I've hidden deep inside and to be honest first to myself and then to the world. In writing the book, I know I've put my story out there. So I cannot, my daughter was asking me last night, Mommy, why haven't we done this? And I said, you've actually reminded me that the book ministers to me on a daily basis. And I'm trusting that the readers would find that as well, that never ever will I start something that I don't intend to finish.
It's a beautiful, beautiful book. It's a nice read, I must just admit. I like your style. You've got a wonderful, wonderful style of writing. Really beautiful. You should write more.
Thank you.
Because you mentioned offset that you started journaling from a young age.
Yes.
Putting things on paper. You should write a lot. And that is true. I think that's another thing. Isn't it interesting that you, as you steer yourself on a specific road, that while you're on that road, you discover more about yourself.
Yes.
That wasn't there. Or most probably there, but dormant.
Yes.
And now all of a sudden it comes to full cycle. Yeah. And that's it with your writing. This is an important one. This point number 9 here, you say, keep your idea hidden. Can I tell you something? You've got a lot to share. When I was younger, I used to share my thoughts, my ideas, every single thing. You know, I design a book entitled One Team, One Dream. Yeah. It's built on teamwork. How quick they change tires in the pit stop in less than 1.35 seconds. Wow. So I will share this, and people will take stuff and make it their own. And my wife always used to say, put your stuff in a book. Yes. Then they know it's your stuff. Yes. Yeah. Yes. So on this point, 9, keep your idea hidden. So what happened to you? Why do you think this was so important?
Oh my goodness. I'm in the design space in the bank, and because I'm a creative person, I love to write, I love to put new ideas, I love to, use your environment, look at the sun and not look at the sun, but look at what it creates, the ripple effect, the colors, the way the sun just hits a certain spot at the right time. Mm-hmm. And here I am going to work and saying to my friend, we should do this, we should take this product and develop it like that, and this is how you write the manual, and let's do this and this kind of training. Believe you me, 3 days down the line, we sit in an EXCO meeting, and here my friend presents the very same. So again, Dr. Carl, I listen to your preachings and your teachings, even if I don't go to your church.
Okay.
I remember one specific teaching you were on about Mary and Elizabeth, where the principle that you brought out was, why was it so important for Elizabeth to keep her pregnancy silent for 5 months? Yes, 5 is grace, but you brought it out so beautifully in saying sometimes the grace and the favor that God has in your life needs to be kept a secret, not hidden, but a secret, and God will reveal it at the right time, at the appointed time. And I think it was that teaching of yours that led me to knowing, oh my goodness, even if Dr. Carl said this 3-4 years ago, it now even begins to make sense that your vision is your passion. Nobody's going to come with for the ride. You keep it your secret, and when it is right, God will reveal it.
Your writing technique. I'm just looking through your manuscript because I made a note. For instance, you say the more you hold on to unforgiveness, the longer you serve jail sentence.
Yes.
I like that line.
Yes.
I'm gonna steal that from you.
Go for it.
The longer you hang on to unforgiveness, that's how long you just prolong your jail sentence.
Yes.
Yeah. So how do you write? How do you get to this writing technique?
I look at something, and I think I've been given a mind with so much creativity, also because I was never a TV child. I used to play, my mom will tell you that the one time she said to me, what are you playing with? And I had to show her, the toilet roll thing wrapped in a blanket, and that was my doll. But it was that creativeness that you take back into writing, that you look at the sunset and you don't just look at it. You look at the ocean and you don't just look at the wave, but in your mind, you have to almost ask yourself, if I was a wave, how would I break on the shore? And that's what writing means, is that you look at a word and begin to play on it. That's why you're a lawyer, because that is required of you.
You mentioned in the manuscript, your book, of course, will come out in 2 weeks' time. I hope there's a pre-order. People. I hope that people will. I'm not sure if our producer will have the information, but we should put it on the screen. You say often you see your face and you can trace every line, but to turn that gaze inward is a different stare. Often we demand honesty from those around us. But can we demand that same level of honesty from ourselves to ourselves? You say, unless we are willing to admit that we deserve honesty, we will feel like waves and backwash, back in the ocean, back and forth, back and forth. How it will end is completely up to you. How do you get to that line?
Again, I was challenged by the Holy Spirit. When I was younger, because I wanted to please everybody else, I imagined in my head I had all these drawers, like a chest of drawers. You pack everything in there. And all my emotions, all my dreams, all my visions, I used to pack in drawers. I used to have a drawer for every single thing in my head. And it wasn't until I was on the mission field that God allowed the young people that I was ministering to deal with the things that I dealt with as a child. And therefore, I was forced to be honest with myself. I was forced to be honest by going and staring in the mirror and becoming naked physically, but more important, spiritually. And I stood in front of that mirror and I had to gaze inwardly. I had to see who Racquel was. I had to come up with what my name meant. What was my dad? If there ever was one thing my dad gave me, was my name. And I had to ask myself, what was his intention of naming me Racquel? Racquel is derived from Rachel, which means strength, tenacity. And that is where I had to go back into and saying, Lord, every time that I call my name, I'm calling on that strength, not my own, but your strength. And it is when you are honest with yourself, there's no turning back. There's no turning back, because you're not going to be able, you can lie to the world, but not to yourself. You're going to have to come back again and stand before that mirror and says, "Jo, ek het nog gelieg, forgive me." It's easier to forgive somebody else, difficult to forgive yourself. And only once you put that gaze inwardly, you'll be like that wave tossing in the ocean back and forth, back and forth. And when you are not honest with yourself, you're going to get, or honest with the world, you're going to find yourself in a place where you're neither hot nor cold. You're neither in the deep end of the ocean or the shallow end of the ocean. And so I encourage you to start going to the mirror and looking at yourself differently.
So I just want to finish this last one, this last of the 10 points. You said, I think we touch on it now, to thine own self be true. Share that line.
To thy own self be true. Shakespeare said it. If you're not true to you, you can't give what you do not have. If you don't have honesty, if you don't have love, you can't give. And so therefore it is important, so important, to be true to yourself. You're going to save yourself a whole lot of battles, a whole lot of challenges by being honest with yourself. So to yourself, be true. It doesn't matter if the next person doesn't like your truth. Your truth is your truth. Nobody can take it away from you. So even if you you find yourself in a relationship that you feel that you're struggling with, because you want to please the next person, you're never going to be happy. So, I often minister to gender-based violence victims, and it is always in that situations, people are always saying, move out, leave him, don't go back. But if you are true to yourself, there's an inner struggle that you've been struggling with, that you have not been honest with yourself. And it's only when you find that point of being true to yourself that you're going to find either the courage to leave or the tenacity to stay. But you're also going to find the tools in which to do either or.
A mouthful, eh? So if you consider kids out there that's raised without fathers, how will you encourage them? Because I can just imagine, because I don't know that. It's hard for me to understand, but you know. So what will you tell them?
I was blessed with, yes, not having my dad present, but I had fathers or father figures was placed in my way. So I would encourage you as any young person to find that father figure, not in a boyfriend, not in somebody who doesn't have your best interest at heart. If you really pray through it, if you really talk to people, you will find that I can look up to this person. I was privileged to have 2 or 3 of them in my life, which guided me and showed me what it is to be loved by a man, genuinely loved, not love in a relationship way, but love in a platonic way, loving unconditionally. And I would say to any girl or to any boy child who doesn't have that father figure, find somebody that you can confide in. Find somebody that's going to guide you and lead you into the path. Don't use it as an excuse, because what I find sometimes is that, ek het nie met 'n pa groot geraak and so I decided to get married to this person that is beating me on because that's what I wanted. No, I'm saying find somebody that's going to give you a different perspective of how that relationship needs to look like.
What have you learned from your experience with apartheid? So, what lessons can you share with us, or with our viewers, around the bitterness that goes with that, the unfairness? And you managed to press through the dusty roads of Kliptown, live in a flat there, then move from there, and then you study human resources. You finish a degree in there. You lifted yourself at 44, and you managed to get a law degree. You're an advocate now. And this didn't just come on a silver platter. So it's easy to go back and blame apartheid, but what did you learn through that experience?
What I learned during apartheid days was my gran was an awesome woman, like I said before. She brought me up to believe in yourself. Doesn't matter the color of your skin, doesn't matter the type of hair you have, doesn't matter where you come from, you push through stuff. So when I experienced apartheid for the first time was when I received a negative letter from WITS where they said to me, your application has been unsuccessful, we've reached the quota of your type. So I'm like, quota of my type? What does that exactly mean? And it wasn't when I got to Cape Town, where ons like almal dieselfde in die Kaap. And there was no quota, there was no type, there was all of us there. But what I found in Cape Town, and through the apartheid years, being involved in the struggle, fighting for what we believed was right, was the one thing is not to be bitter. I often find now when we look back, and even our government always says we blame it on apartheid, we blame it on apartheid. The longer you blame your past, the future is going to be oblique. You're never going to look towards seeing what lies ahead of you because you're continuously looking back. I mean, the Lord said to Lot's wife, "Moenie terugkyk," and she decided to look back and turned into a pillar of salt. So when you look back, you're not going to see the path ahead of you. So apartheid taught me tenacity. It taught me self-worth. It taught me to look in my environment and use what I have in my environment in order to fight through the system that taught me that I was no good, that taught me that because of the color of my skin, I can't move forward. And I think that is what brought me to a point of making sure that whatever I take on in my life, I do it and I do it well. That is what apartheid taught me. It didn't leave me bitter. I could have been bitter, but it didn't leave me bitter. And that's what I find a lot of us that grew up under that era uses it as a crutch and say because of apartheid. But this morning, let me encourage you and say to you, use it as a stepping stone. Use it to go forward. Use it so that you look back one day and say to your kids, because of apartheid, I am where I am today.
So in the secular atmosphere, it's easy to most probably pin apartheid. But now you're a Christian and you're now in the missionary field and you're now in Swaziland. And here you're with a mixed group. And share a little about the group and what was it all about. And I really want to relate to the story there because you've noticed color there for the very first time amongst Christians.
Yes, I promise you, this is the Church of God. This is where you're supposed to be one. We had a program which was Simunye, we are one, and we were a mixed team. We were 3 blacks and 2 whites, or 3 whites, and just Indian colored and black and white. And when we had just returned from Mozambique. So what the missionary organization that I worked with, is to take people from all colors in South Africa and place them together to show the world that we actually can live together. This is nonsense that the government is saying because of the different colors we can't mix and we have to stay in our separate groups. But the organization believed that we can work together, and that's a message that we took. We came from Mozambique. We caught malaria in Mozambique. So here in Swaziland, I was the first one to get ill, but not as ill. And the rest of my team, the white guys in my team, also fell ill. But we don't have cars. My mom didn't have a car. And here comes my white friends, 2 of them, and their parents drive all the way. One drives from Bethlehem, the other one drives from Pretoria to come and fetch their children. And they took their children and they took them home. And here, the 3 blacks were now left behind. So none of us can drive. We don't have a Kumbi to drive with. And the organization sends an Indian guy to come and check on us. He was the leader at the time. And he comes, lo and behold, only takes the Indian girl and takes her back to Johannesburg. And here left behind are the 2 darkies, if you want to call it that. Sick as ever, no way to travel. Even if we could travel, we don't have licenses, so we couldn't move. And that for me was like, wow, even in God's church, even in God. Maybe at the time they didn't think of it like that, but afterwards, because it really hampered our ministry, it really did. I was so unforgiving. I was so angry. I was so bitter that when we were told that it's the very same guy who left us in Swaziland that's going to be our leader to the States, I'm like, no, Lord, no, you can't do this. But it was only after our stint in the States, at the airport, at Heathrow Airport, where we could sit down and talk. And where we could really say, or after it was an incident that happened at our host house, it was snowing, and they began saying how they were so blessed to have their parents pick them up. I got so angry, I just ran out in the snow. I'm like, no, I cried because I knew what it felt like. I felt so abandoned. By Christian people who were supposed to have my back. And after that incident, we could sit and talk, and here we could say how betrayed, how abandoned, how bitter we felt. And then only we were able to minister. I mean, this is the last part of our ministry. We've been there for almost 4 months. And only now we are able to minister the way we were supposed to minister when we got there.
Are you open to share how you received Jesus Christ as your Lord and your personal Savior?
Yes. I grew up in a Christian home, Pastor Carl. If I think a lot of colored people grew up in Christian homes. So going to church was not something that was foreign to me. But when I got to Cape Town, I really just said, take everything and throw it out. I'm not interested in this Christian life. I can't do what I will do. And I got involved with alcohol. I got involved with the wrong kind of friends. Clubbing, my studies was not important for me. Clubbing and being disobedient was my thing. Until I hit rock bottom, I was so drunk. I was so drunk. I crawled to my room. I just, I pray. I'm like, if only I can be sober, please help me. Just be sober. I don't like this feeling of being drunk. And the next morning, I found myself standing at the bus stop. East People Ministries had a bus in Cape Town that passed by the university to go to church. And I found myself standing at this bus stop. I think I was still swaying of being so filled with alcohol, but I got onto this bus. And I got to church, and Pastor Paul, I will never forget, Pastor Paul preached a sermon, very simple sermon, and said, take on my yoke, it is light, and my burden is easy. If there's anybody here who feels that he's been carrying around a burden, let him come to the front and accept Jesus. And I cried. I bawled my eyes out, but I found myself in the front. And from there, it has never been the same. I don't like alcohol. I don't like the feeling of being drunk, because on that day, God, yes, He saved me. Yes, I asked Jesus into my life, but it wasn't, boom, ships, stripes, fireworks. It was just such a peace that when I left there, I just wanted to know more about God. I started getting into the Word. I started understanding, mixing the scriptures, because for me, that's important. My inquisitive mind was like, okay, what does the small letter mean here? Okay, miskien is daar nog 'n skrif. And that's how I started contrasting the scriptures. So I teach in my church, but I'm not a preacher. I love teaching. I love teaching the Word of God. I love taking the scriptures and comparing them and seeing what it means and delving deep into the scriptures. And at that day, that is when that passion was birthed.
So for somebody that's rock bottom out there, they're suicidal, what message do you have for a person like that?
We all of us have that rock bottom moment. If we can be so true to ourselves, we all have that. For me, at the age of 17, 16, I hit that rock bottom. It was just too much for me. The drawers in my head was getting too full. My grandfather was he had a nursery, and so there was a lot of things in the house that you could use as poison, whatever. And that night, I just decided to take that poison. And my gran came in, but she didn't know what I was doing. And I promise you, I lay in that bed and everything was burning, but I want to die. But again, God in His mercy saved me that night. He knew that it was not my time to die. But to the person who is hitting rock bottom, suicide is never a way out. It is a permanent solution for a temporary problem. So find that person, send a WhatsApp, send a voice note, phone, let something fall or something, but don't go down the route of suicide. We see too many of our young people, too many of our older people getting into suicide, but it is not the way out. Call us. We will be there. I'm sure somebody, if you say, you know what, I want to do this, call somebody, but let somebody know. Talk to somebody. Find that confidant that you can confide in.
What's a PhDS syndrome? You mentioned it more than once. Why you call it a PhDS syndrome?
It's a puller down syndrome.
Yeah.
Many women, and you find this amongst women, I don't know about the men, but you find this among women. And I don't know if it's a color thing or whatever, but I've experienced it from a color side and I've experienced from a white side. That whenever you want to climb or do something, whenever you achieve something, you will always find your friend wanting to pull you down. Either it's going to be gossiped about you, either it's going to be discouraging you, or either it's going to be, no man, this is for you, somebody's always, but it's always going to be your girlfriend that you think has been there, your running partner, your running mate, that's going to say, "Nee man, No, this is not for you. So that's what the puller down syndrome is about. I'm not going to elevate my friend. I'm not going to encourage her. Even if I know, we were on Saturday, we had a women's conference, and one of the other ladies were there that is also releasing a book. And the one thing that you find yourself is that you almost like, nee, ek gaan nou nie vir haar promote because what's going to happen to my book if I promote her? So that is what a puller down syndrome is. When we as women begin to acknowledge the gifting that we have and that together we can build, and not I'm working against you. Again, it comes down to the thing of being in competition. Your book is not my book. Your story is not my story. But your story also needs to be told, and I need to acknowledge that.
And God is faithful. He is faithful.
Indeed.
When you start blessing, it's in a measure you give
Yeah,
that you receive. It's
Yes.
always like that. The
Yes.
more you bless others, the more you will be
Yes.
blessed. So you work in the FBO space, you work in the NGO space, you work in the corporate space, you work in the government space. I've noticed extensively with the political party that you mentioned in your book, and in the legal space. So which is your space?
My space for now, for this season in my life, is getting into the space of encouraging young people. So many young people in this time, especially in this pandemic, has lost so much focus with schoolwork. I see it with my teenage daughters, that they, ek gaan nou nie die ding doen nie. I don't want to do it. I don't want to sit at the being taught about through a computer anymore. I want to be in physical school. But because I don't find, so I find myself in that space having to encourage women, mothers who are now struggling. Maybe there are incomes that are being lost through this pandemic. Maybe there is fathers who have lost their work, and moms now have to come up with a different income, or both partners have to come up with a different income. So that's the space that I'm finding myself into. COVID has not only dampened our resources in our country, but it has hit every single sphere economically. And so if we don't have that encouragement, either from the church, from the family, or from our community, we're going to find ourselves being dilapidated spiritually, physically, emotionally. So I have learned that, and in writing, completing my book, finalizing or bringing the book to completion, I have noticed that I have not played enough in this space, and that's where I'm in now.
Mm-hmm. In your book, you talk about marriage. Do you have some nuggets for us?
Yes. Marriage is the mystery of two becoming one. For real. You have two different worlds. Don't for not one reason think that he is going to be the person that you want him to be, that you dreamt about when you were 12 years old. It's going to take the two of you to build a relationship, to mold one another. One, respect. Respect yourself, respect him. Two, love yourself enough to know that even if the two has become one, my dreams is not his dreams. I'm still an individual, and I still need to develop on my own in order for us to be strong. 50% doesn't make a whole. You have to come 100%, and he comes 100%. That's when we begin to be a whole and function as a whole.
You mentioned in your book around the mere fact that you want your husband to love you to such an extent that you, in your fullness of your call or your niche, that's deep, in a sense that because there's in marriage, you can be selfish if you want to.
Yes.
One will only develop and not see the other one. And sometimes someone will come to the marriage precisely why you marry this person for. Mm-hmm. And then you literally work so hard letting that person lose themselves within marriage. Mm-hmm. So if you love enough to see your partner become what she's supposed to be, that's the greatest joy. Is in the fullness of that person. Yes. That will be a healthy marriage, a good one, because everybody lives their lives. Isn't that so? Yeah. Oh, you know what? Time is flying, and I'm here with the advocate from the dusty streets of Kliptown. She made her way through life, and you are a strong fighter. Do you feel that you finished what you've started? So is this book the testimony of a finished project, or is it an installment?
This is an installment. Mm-hmm. This is an installment because as I finished the book, the next book was already being written whether in the spirit, but I've started with the first 4 chapters of the next book.
Not to say too much. What's in your head for the next book?
We've lost so many things in life through our own fault, through faults of others, and that's where I'm going to leave it.
Okay, because you've touched on one of your points that you cannot share everything.
Yeah.
So we don't want a book to come out through the pen of somebody else.
Yeah.
That is it now.
Yeah.
Now, tell me, is this your first book? Of course, there's barriers. And as this is your first book, book advocate, what were some of the barriers you have had to overcome to get your story printed for it, or to get it to a print form? Because there's a lot of barriers. Like, first of all, is to believe in yourself. Second is, can you write? Do you think it's enough for somebody out there? What type of barriers did you experience? Difficulties? What went through your head?
What went through my head was, one, where am I going to get the finances? Because you need the finances in order to put your story out there. When I researched publishers and how to really publish a book and what goes into that has been the financial issue, until I found Inspire. Inspire is an awesome family of, they really make you feel like family. And even the costing involved in that was like, okay, I can do this. I can write my story. But the second barrier was, like you said, do you believe you have a story to tell? Do you believe that once I put my story out there, is it going to be appreciated by the next person? And how much do you want to share and put yourself out there? Because you must remember that once you put a story like this out there, people is always going to look at you with that in mind. Whether it's, for me, in my space, it's, if I stand before the judge and the judge will ask me, counsel, your papers are not in order. Is your papers not in order? What have you been busy with last night? So you need to think about those things. Secondly is, do you have enough vocabulary? I believe that every person has a story to tell, but do you have the vocabulary to tell that story? And those are barriers I faced. It may not be the same barrier you faced. Secondly, do you have the resource? Fifthly, do you have the resources? Are you able to sit down with a pen and a paper? Don't think it's just about a computer and being able to type. Do you have the pen and the paper to write? Because once you start writing, your thoughts begin to flow. You will package it afterwards. You can sit. And do you have the space and the time? Because space and time is important.
So, do you have a message for others? I want you to share a little about people that want to tell their story, and people who struggle to finish. What message and closure do you have for somebody out there?
Start. It's like any athlete that wants to complete a race. You have to start at the starting point. You can't start in the middle at 500 meters if you want to complete a 100-meter race or 1.5-meter race. We just come out of the Olympics. So start. Start at the beginning. You have a story to tell. You have something, a degree that you need to finish. You have a recipe that you need to finish. My mom knits, and many times I'm like, Mommy, why isn't this jersey finished? Mommy, whose jersey is this? Mommy, what? Finish it. Start with anything. A cup of tea. How many times, Dr. Carl, if you be honest, have you not finished a cup of coffee or tea?
Yeah, more than once.
Exactly.
I finished this one.
All right. So that's where you start.
Yes. You have to start somewhere. That's the message for everybody. Yes. If you want to write a book, start somewhere. Yes. If you want to study, get to the university and enroll. Yeah. If you just start somewhere. Yes. If you want to have a husband one day, pray. Pray. Start somewhere. So tell us a little about your family. You're married to who, and your kids and so on.
I have 2 beautiful daughters. The little one is not my biological daughter. It's my sister's daughter, but she's been with us since the day she came here, so she's my daughter. And then I have a 17-year-old who thinks that she's 70 years old. I'm married to a legal eagle. He has just been appointed as the Northern Cape High Judge. So he's in the Northern Cape, advocate or Justice Nxumalo, who's back in the Northern Cape. And that's my family, my mom and 3 sisters.
And you practice on the side.
I practice in Johannesburg, though I'm a member of the Johannesburg Bar, and I'm now a member of the Northern Cape Bar as well.
Everybody out there, a book to have. We went through the manuscript. It's a nice read, I must just say, a beautiful read. I like the way you format and the way you place your wording. It's really so easy. You just, when you pick it up, you just don't want to put it down. You want to, you kind of let it flow. You knit it from one story into the other, It's beautifully packaged. Well done, Judge Kelly. All the best.
No, not judge yet. Husband is judge. I'm still advocate.
Okay, well done, Advocate Kelly. Am I prophesying here?
Yes, you are.
Everybody out there, it was so good to spend time with you and with Advocate Kelly here on the show here in her book. We have the manuscript, Finish What You've Started. And all of us are at one point or the other guilty. If for the one, it might not be studies, but something else. You start something, but you never finish it. Well, that's it for today on the Inside Show with Carl Hendricks. And this is the goodbyes. I would love you, please sign on to this page and hit that bell every single time. When we're on, you will know that we are online. From me to you, and big thanks to Advocate Kelly. And from us to you, goodbye, and thank you so much for this wonderful opportune time to spend with you. Goodbye for now. Good morning, everybody. It is so good to have you here with me. Imagine
If you have your vision as the car with the right team.
Imagine how quick that vision will come into the footsteps. Something that was taking 5 years, 3 months. This morning is all about the leadership and influence.